In this video, I want to get into the conversation of many-to-many relationships within the FileMaker platform. Now, structuring a many-to-many relationship is pretty standard through all the versions of FileMaker, at least since FileMaker 7. So what you're going to learn here is going to be universally applicable. Now, we're covering many-to-many relationships here towards the end of this training segment because it's a little bit more complicated, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, I've watched training videos that other people have put together on this. I've read FileMaker's technical support document. And the problem is that everyone who tries to teach you about many-to-many relationships, well, they really make a mess of it. And they make it more complicated than it has to be. So the first word that they talk about is a join table. Well, let's explode that word and get rid of it for now, because it's not something that's going to help you learn many-to-many relationships. In fact, any relationship in FileMaker is one that has some sort of need or basis in real life. And that's really the key to understanding how to build relationships in FileMaker in the first place. And it's critical to understanding what a many-to-many relationship is. So the many-to-many relationship definition, according to FileMaker, is when one or more rows in a table, i.e. records in the table, are associated or related to one or more records in another table. And then they go on to explain that you need to use join tables and foreign keys and all this sort of stuff. Let's talk about this in more plain English. I think that will radically help you. My job is to help you understand this, and so bear with me here. I think you'll like this. The easiest way to think about the many-to-many relationship is to analyze this where it comes up in your business. So let's talk about a couple different scenarios. Each one should be pretty simple to understand. But it's important for you to apply this to your own organization or business, because that's the special skill set you have already. You already understand your business better than probably any FileMaker consultant that's out there. So if you can understand the real world connections here, then this should be easy for you to understand. So let's talk about students and courses and classes and that type of thing. So let's say we're building a grading database or a training database for your organization. In fact, we have a training organization out in Las Vegas, and this was a problem I solved 15 years ago, but they still use FileMaker. And so this is a great example. And what's helpful when scribbling this down is to write down what each record represents. So in the students table, that's probably pretty straightforward for you. You're going to say one record equals one unique student. Okay, pretty straightforward. Then we have training or courses that we give them. Now, before we start connecting things, let's just get the players on the field. You know, what are the players? Well, we have classes that we provide. Okay, so we have, let's just call them courses. So we have a courses table, and we're going to write down once again, one record equals one unique course. And you say, well, why is it unique? Well, I mean, somewhere you have to have a unique list of course, right? Okay, so if you start thinking you need more than that, well, you're trying to jump ahead. The reason that many-to-many relationships mess people's brains up is that they don't walk through this methodically. That's what we're trying to do. So we got students, we got courses. Now you think to yourself, hey, a student needs to take a course. Okay, that's totally cool. So you would think that you would draw a line from the students to the courses. But you're jumping ahead. You're trying to connect the dots. There are other things that occur. So if you're a training organization or you're a junior high school, for example, and so we have all these students, and then the courses look like this: English 1A, English 1B, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry 1, Geometry 2, Pre-Calculus. And so you say, well, the students should be in the calculus class. But what we said over here on the right is that each course is a single unique course. So right here is a critical juncture for you to understand your business. You're missing something. You have a list of students, you have a list of courses that you offer, because the courses are not repeated. Math is not in there for the spring of this year, the spring of last year, the spring of next year. I said that each record had to be unique. So you're saying, well, I want to offer math class 4 times a year or once a year. Okay, well then that's an occurrence of the class or the course, right? So this gets into this idea that we need a database to cover the actual courses that are being taught. Right? The actual class in room 3 and in room 5, what are they teaching from 8 to 9 o'clock? And room 6 from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. And so what is being taught at what time? Those are important things. So that's actually another group of records. So to keep things straight, we have students, we have courses, and we're going to create a third table called classes. And the definition here is something that's a little bit more tricky than what we've had before. We're going to say that each record in the class table is a single occurrence of a course. And you go right on. So if we have an English class and it's offered, fall, spring, and summer, or whatever it's going to be offered, say it is fall, spring, and summer, then that would be 3 records in the class table, but they would actually connect relationally to the 1 record in the course table, because that is the English class there in that course table. In fact, sometimes for clarity, I will tell people to call that the course catalog. That emphasizes the fact that it's a catalog of the available courses. It's not an occurrence of the course. The occurrence of a course is what we call classes, right? So once again, you could change the names to whatever you want. But this is plain English for most people, right? So it makes sense that we could relationally connect a course ID that's a primary key to the course ID that's a foreign key, and that foreign key being inside the class table, right? Pretty straightforward. Now the rub is that in a class there's going to be more than one student, right? And there's no easy direct way immediately for you to directly connect the student to the class, because that is a single relationship connection. Remember what we said, it's a single student is 1 record, and in the class it's 1 record for the class. But you're going to need to have multiple entries in the class because we're going to have multiple students. I mean, most classes have multiple students, that being an assumption. So we're actually missing another table. This table I would recommend calling students assigned. Now you could come up with a different word, you might say students attending, but that might get into attendance records, which is totally different within an educational organization. So the assigned students is another table, okay? And so once again, we're going to write down in plain English underneath this what each record is. So 1 record here represents a single student who attends that class. Now in FileMaker, you'll sometimes see these referred to as line items. You could call it the class line items. That's another way of calling it. It makes no technical difference, but if you're playing with FM Starting Point, for example, you'll see invoices and invoice line items. Well, classes line items or students assigned to a class, that's basically what we're talking about. So in the class table, what is the relationship between class and the students in the class? Well, it's going to be the class ID. This is a primary key on the class side. It's a foreign key here with the students that are assigned to that class. And of course, connecting students to the students that are assigned to the class is quite simple because that's the student ID. The student ID is a primary key, of course, under students, and then it's a foreign key for the students who are assigned to the class. So I talk to people all the time, and they're reading the online technical information and this and that and the other thing. And what they do, they come to me and they say, well, I have students on one side, I got courses or classes on the other side, and we need a join table. So they define a table called join, but then they don't know how to connect. And I would say is that you're going about designing it the wrong way when you do that. You need to fundamentally understand the elements and the interactions at your organizational level. Forget the technical. Understand at the organizational level. You have courses. You'll see the actual classes, okay? And then you actually have the students themselves. So by understanding the business elements, you can model this technically, but do it at the organizational level first and draw it out on paper as necessary, and then move on to building it in the relational diagram. Don't get hung up on the fact that you might need a join table, because the join table is a generic term for an actual business process within your organization. But you kind of weaseled out and you don't know what it is, but you just say it's a join table and you throw it in there, okay? Now we're going to speed this up. We're going to do another example. So a nice lady calls and talks to me and she says, well, I have this business and I'm building a database for this business that we have, and it's a travel business. And she could not get her head wrapped around how to structure the database. But when I asked her about the organizational elements, she instantly knew what those were. So I said, well, what are the elements? Who are the players here? Well, we have the people who are buying travel packages, right? It's a pre-canned travel package where you get to go and visit Paris and wherever you're going, to London, and you get to do things while you're there. So we have people buying these packages. And so whether you call them people or travelers or whatever you call them, they're basically, contacts. So that's one group. Then we actually have travel packages that we want to sell. So at least we have the two ends. Now we know there's some stuff in the middle, but we have the two ends. We have a travel package. What is the definition of a travel package? One record equals a pre-configured trip to a specific location. And so once again, you think to yourself there, well, is that kind of like the course catalog? Well, it really is. So if you have a travel package to, say, Paris, and we're going to see the Eiffel Tower, and you spend 5 days there, then that would be one record here. But you say, well, but I want to offer that once a month, every month. Okay, well, that's another entity within our business, right? We have the actual pre-canned travel package where we've prearranged everything and we've gone out and made connections and contracts and things like that. But each occurrence of that travel package is really something different. Well, what is it? Well, let's just call it a trip for now. So it's a trip. So one record in the trip database becomes a travel package on a specific date or time. In other words, a trip is an occurrence of a travel package. And you go, okay, that makes sense. Over here on the right, with some records, we might have Paris and London. But then over here, we might have trips where the Paris trip is January 5th, February 5th, March 5th. Cool. So then you think to yourself, well, how does that connect to the people? Okay. Well, the people are going to buy something from you, which almost always results in an invoice. Now, the structuring here gets a little bit interesting because it'll vary from business to business. But let's say that your business model is that a single person can buy themselves a trip from your organization. So an invoice is equal to one person taking a trip. You can add additional levels of complexity where one person could buy 4 or 5 different trips, which is fine, but we're trying to keep this conversation under control for the moment. So the contact is going to be connected to the invoice, which makes sense. That's the relational connection there. Now, what's interesting is we have this stuff on the right, we have this stuff on the left. How do we connect them? Well, you have to think about the business process. So if you have a trip, which is, say, the February version of this trip, and most likely to save money and cost, you'll have a group rate, which means that you're going to want to sell 20 or 30 or 50 of these trips to make it all worthwhile. So then you're going to actually have 50 people who might sign up for that trip. Okay? So then you think to yourself, well, okay, so then we need another table, which is one person signing up for a specific trip. But that happens to be the very same definition of our invoice. So that's one of those golden moments where you have understanding and the lights come on and I get thank you notes from people saying, oh, I get it. Very cool. So you understand that you have contacts, then you have invoices, and then you actually have the trip, and then you actually have the travel package. And once again, each of these tables has a primary key, and it will relate to the foreign key next to it, right? So this gets back to what is a many-to-many relationship. Well, a many-to-many relationship is nothing more than at least 2 one-to-many relationships that are connected to each other. Now, in both these scenarios, we actually have essentially like 2 join tables in the middle. I mean, it depends on your definition, but why get into the technical definition when it doesn't help you? It's more important that you understand your business and then you make FileMaker understand your business. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, if you want to know about how to structure the relationships, well, hopefully you've watched the other videos previously and you've watched the anchor buoy videos, because while we can have 3 or 4 of these strung together, the way I recommend that you structure them together is using anchor buoy. So most likely these all won't be strung together like this. You'll have the contacts or the students or the people as an anchor with the primary key, and then the foreign key will be off to the right as the buoy, right? Then somewhere else you'll have the students that are attending or the travel invoice, and you'll want to set that up. Once again, remember that the primary key side is the anchor side. Once again, we cover this in the anchor buoy conversation. And then you connect the multiple related records to that with the foreign key on the right side. So if this doesn't make sense, definitely make sure to go back and revisit the anchor buoy videos, which will be very helpful. You combine all these skills together and you'll be able to structure and build more complex FileMaker solutions that'll really help your business.